What is up, guys? This is Linthio coming at you with a discussion video today about Floodgate cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! And kind of the future of them. So in the most recent ban list, we have had Vanity's Emptiness and Skill Drain, arguably two of the biggest floodgates of the previous formats, hit to 1. And that, to me, sends a big message to the community from Konami saying, hey, we realise that floodgates aren't healthy for the game, and we're going to actually put a bit of a leash on them. We're going to control these floodgates a little bit so that, you know, if you set up and then flip a floodgate, it's not just going to be an auto win. Now with the floodgates hit, as I said, arguably the two greatest floodgates, there's going to be a bit of a testing period now over the next month to see which arguably quote-unquote floodgate cards the player base can actually now utilize and take advantage of and maybe even abuse. One of the new cards coming out in the next set is called Lose a Turn, and it's the closest to one of the strongest floodgates that we're going to be getting, I think, for a while. Continuous Trap, I did a discussion video on it a while ago and it will be down in the description below. When a monster special summoned, its effect is negated until the end of the turn. When monsters are normal summons, they get shifted to defense position. And I feel that this is kind of the new age of floodgate cards and the way to kind of stun your opponent. Now, stun decks can still have a good stand-up, you know, but they need things like Thunder King Ryo to go up to more than 1, because that card really hurts a lot of decks this format. And, you know, the best deck arguably, which is going to probably be in the Cloths, gets completely shut down by it. Floodgates are one of these things, it's like Marmite in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! You either love them or you hate them. There's a very, very divided opinion on whether they're actually good for the game or whether they are actually bad for the game. The pros for it to being good for the game are that it keeps the game in check, and it just means that you can't just run around with these crazy OTK decks and just have no response to what your opponent's doing. The cons to not having it, it leads the way to not being able to protect yourself that much. You're going to have to now stock up on, you know, if you are playing a back row heavy deck or a deck that uses, you know, an average of 5 to 10 traps, you're going to have to find alternatives. They probably should have put some of the other trap cards that are limited up to maybe 2 to kind of strengthen it. Give yourself just a bit of a stand-in chance. Things like Compulsory Evacuation Device, Bottomless, and Torrential Tribute, that were all at 1, probably should have come up, to be honest. Torrential Tribute could probably stay at 1, but things like Bottomless and Compulsory Evacuation Device, I feel should have maybe gone to 2. Maybe not both of them at the same time. I think Bottomless should have probably been one of the ones that went to 2. Now, the two that I think are most feasible to come back are Bottomless and Compulsory Evacuation Device. And they do kind of the same thing, but Bottomless has more of a restriction on the fact that it has to be 1/5 or higher. And if your opponent's monster has built-in protection where it doesn't get destroyed, it doesn't affect it at all. With Compulsory Evacuation Device, it's more of a, I can, you know, send basically any monster back unless it has some form of built-in protection where it can't be affected by traps or can't be targeted, or, you know, you have an out to it like a Forbidden Lance or anything like that. Being able to have defensive traps in this game, I feel, is still really important. And that's why they've got, you know, Deprison to 2 and most recently Mirror Force to 3. I think Mirror Force at 3 is a very strong thing. You know, destroying monsters isn't as great as it once was. Flipping over Mirror Force isn't as game-changing as it can be, depending on the deck you're playing, but it's still a very strong card, and you can really, really turn the game around if you have that Mirror Force and your opponent doesn't read it. Because at the end of the day, you know, the amount of times I've seen people attack into back row with 5 monsters and the Mirror Force has been flipped, and that is it. You have lost. You have negged 4 to your opponent. And it's just very difficult to come back from that. Floodgates in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are going to be an interesting thing to see now, because there are other things like Summon Limit, I think it is. It's a continuous trap or spell. It's one of them that neither player can special summon more than twice per turn. I think people are going to start putting these cards in, especially if the format really ramps up to be a lot quicker, if Cloths start running around again, if, you know, Heretics start building up a little bit. I think that people will start looking at all these other cards that, you know, used to be considered jank and not good enough simply because there were other cards like Skill Drain and Vanity's Emptiness that kept everything in check. I think one card that could probably, maybe they could try out, especially with now Vanity's at 1, is Royal Oppression at 1, and I'm going to do a discussion video on that, but it's an interesting one that could definitely be a hit or miss, much like Snatch Steal. It could either be fitting in nicely to the meta, or it can be a completely game-changing card that's just brutally unfair like it once was. So what do you guys think of Floodgate cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now that Vanities and Skill Drain has been hit to 1? Do you think there is going to be more of a tendency to not have these cards in decks anymore, and Konami are going to kind of tone down on making these cards that are just so brutal? Let's not forget Skill Drain and Vanities are very, very old cards. The most recent one, you know, I think it's Skill Drain was in Dark Crisis and Vanities was obviously in Starstrike Blast. They're very old sets. So you just got to think that maybe the actual card design is old, and that's why these cards were so good. And that's fortunately why the ban list is there, to stop these old design cards, because, you know, they were crafted for one format, and now we're many, many formats, many years even in the future, and they just don't fit into how the game now runs. So as I said, let me know down in the comment section below what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, and I should catch you guys later.